Here I am, Lord. What a beautiful hymn. Thank you for that. Thank you. Please join me in prayer. Dear God, we ask that you join us this morning in this beautiful worship service to pause in our busy lives and think a bit about stewardship and to celebrate all that we've done and accomplished together and to think about what is possible in your work and in your mission through the church. Amen. Well, what a beautiful service. What a great church. It was a lovely drive out here. The first half of it in bright sunshine, you won't believe, given the rain you just had. And the second half in dark cloud. And the farmland looking beautiful and green and beautiful and pretty moist in the last part. So I'm delighted to be here. As you heard, I graduated in St. Thomas, so I feel like I'm back in the area. It's great to be back. And really what I'm here to do is to really remind you and to thank you for all that you're doing in financial stewardship. And to just pause together for a minute and think about where the idea of financial stewardship fits in to our broader sense of stewardship. We've heard about stewardship of labor, stewardship of relationship, and stewardship of earth in the last 3 weeks. And so today is about financial stewardship, and it really wraps all of those together. And first of all, it is about stewardship. You heard, and I was asked, Julia asked me about the title Director of Philanthropy. I think that was just a way of the National Office wrapping together stewardship, the Mission and Service Fund, the Foundation, the Par Giving Program, really the support of a legacy giving program, to wrap it all under one name, philanthropy, really from the Greek, love of fellow human. But philanthropy doesn't have much meaning in congregations. It's all about stewardship. And so I was saying to Julia, other than on my business cards, we just talk about stewardship. And our form of philanthropy in the church is a form of everyone giving what they're able, and every gift greatly appreciated. I know some people early on said, well, so what do you think, we're Bill Gates out here? And we said no. And in fact, even to show that we meant that, every gift that's received at the National Office, whether it's $5 or a large amount, I hand sign the thank you letter for every gift of every size. Even though all the organizations say it should be a certain size before you do that, we all grew up with the story of the widow's mite, and we all grew up knowing how important every financial contribution was. So I'm here first of all to say thanks and to really pause together and think about the scripture that we heard. So like good stewards of the manifold grace of God, serve one another with whatever gift each of you has received. Whoever speaks must do so as one speaking the very words of God. Whoever serves must do so with the strength that God supplies, so that God may be glorified in all things through Jesus Christ. So it's about using our gifts to serve one another. I think it was pretty well covered in the skit, what stewardship is, and the various forms of it, and it's been pretty well covered in the last few weeks. But the important part of financial is it really brings to bear how we're spending our time, our energies, and our assets. I was reading one book on money, and it defined money as that which we give our life's energy for. So money is really what we get back, in most cases, from our hard work, from our jobs, from our toils. And people have often said, well, you can tell somebody's priorities if they show you their schedule. and how they spend their time. They can tell you what is important to them in their life. Just look at how they spend their time. And that's about stewardship. And then others have said, well, you can tell somebody's priorities by looking at how and where they spend their money. And that's stewardship too. I had a chance to speak with a class at Carleton University. It's the first ever. Imagine a class in philanthropy and nonprofit management. Imagine there's a group of people running charitable organizations across Canada, young, bright people. And I had a chance to tell them about the United Church. And I had a chance to brag about all of you a little bit. And that's very un-United Church-like, I know. But I had a chance to say, oh, there's a group of people who profoundly believes and understand that everything they have is a gift of God, and their response is gratitude. And the response to all the gifts of health, the gifts of time, the gifts of nature, the gifts of one another, their response is overwhelmingly gratitude. And in their actions, the default of people in the United Church is always social justice. It's always about looking after people. As it says here, serve one another. That's where United Church people spend their time and energy. And what's stewardship? It's those two pieces coming together. It's the sense of gratitude for everything we have, and the sense of giving back to God, giving back to others, giving back to our church, and to the community. So, if we look at the creed, and we look at the mission, what some people have said might be an overarching mission statement in the church. We need finances to do that, to worship and celebrate God's presence, to live with respect to creation, to love and serve others, to seek justice and resist evil, and to proclaim Jesus crucified and risen, our judge and our hope. If we look at the new mission statement that's being thought through here in this congregation, stewardship is how we carry out our worship, our education, and our compassionate service. So from that, you'll see a lot of the materials we're working on are about God's mission and our gifts. So if there's a tagline underneath stewardship today in the church, it's God's mission, not our mission. It's God's mission, and it's our gifts and how we use those. If we look at what you're a part of, imagine a group of people across the country that every year, to support the work of their congregations and the work of the church, donate out of their own pockets close to $300 million. That's the scale of the United Church across Canada. I know people often talk about the church and say, well, it's dwindling, it's in trouble. I don't know, I see that front row of young people, and I see the young people that are still with us, and I say, the church is going through an interesting transition, but I'm not sure it's in trouble. People draw the graphs of membership since the 60s, and it's been going down, but everything's been going down in civil society since the 60s. And some people have said, it was actually at the London conference here, not this year, but the year before, where a gentleman said, he pointed out to the group that the size of the church now is exactly what it was at the time of church union. So we have this model of decline in our mind, and we have this model of financial scarcity in our mind. But actually, when you look at the church, there's 276,000 families under pastoral care, which is exactly what it was at church union. And many have said, actually the 60s was the aberration. It was an aberration for General Motors, for school boards, for Ford, for government, for all kinds of things. The 60s was a whole piece of demographics that we've lived through. But we've got a church that's now rethinking and rebuilding across Canada, in congregations across the country, and stewardship and financial stewardship is an important part of that. Giving continued to increase to about 2007, And now, since 2007, it's been going down about 1.5% a year, both for stewardship and for the Mission Service Fund. And yes, going down 1.5% a year isn't the best possible news, but it's an awful lot better than what's going on in the economy. I'm sure the people in the Ford Talbotville plant would have loved to have had things go down gently at 1.5% a year. I'm sure a lot of people working in a lot of businesses and involved in a lot of farming would have liked to have seen things go down gently at that kind of rate. And so, when we look at the church itself, it's a mark of enormous generosity. Just take the stewardship here in this congregation, with this beautiful building, well maintained, looked after, thoughtfully cared for. And look at, while you're doing that, the work you've done in Haiti, the work you've done in Africa, with the daycare. Just think of the form of, and each one of those was powered by both time and talent, but also by treasures, also by financial stewardship. So take a minute to feel really good about what you're accomplishing there. I certainly, when I was in Haiti a year ago, I saw some incredible work going on, incredible work by the United Church. This year, I try and go out once a year to get a sense of where our mission and service funds are going and get a clear sense and real stories of what's happening. This year was in Guatemala. Met with the women's collective up in the mountains that had been taught new ways of farming, that had learned how to look after the crops, how to make their own insecticides from plants, how to grow their own potatoes, and they knew how to grow corn. They'd been doing that for 2,000 years, but also how to grow cattle, and then how to negotiate with men to sell the cattle and to get a really good price for them. They were supported by a healthcare worker, a counselor, and an agronomist. It's the money from the United Church that funded that work. And at the end of our visit with them, they unanimously, each one took a turn saying in a different way, "Thank you. It is as if we have woken up." They had learned self-confidence, they had learned how to deal with one another, and they were feeding their children. Their children, a first generation that was able to go to school. And now they were able to look after their kids, feed them well, and clothe them well. Now just think of the impact of that. Often when we think of financial stewardship and we think of annual budgets, we think of it having an impact in 1 year. But the impact is over a long period of time. Generations and generations in Guatemala will be different because of what the United Church did there, because of our financial stewardship. It's what we see in our early lives, what the young people see here in the church, and what they learn about stewardship. Bob Burrows, who was on the board of the foundation, a minister from BC, quite a remarkable man in his late 70s. He's still carrying on a ministry in the far north with the Aboriginal community. He was the head of a ministry that was on a boat that went up and down the west coast for many, many years. He actually had a fly-in ministry. He flew his own plane into the far north to look after people. And he tells the story of stewardship of his father. His father had been laid off. Times were pretty tough. There was no insurance in those days. They were just eking by. And the company was able to get him a bit of money until the company started back up again, and he got that little bit of money. And Bob, he was a young boy, and he was so happy because he knew there'd be more food on the table and everything. And as soon as the father had the envelope, he said to Bob, "Go upstairs and get the stewardship envelopes. We're 3 weeks behind." And Bob, the little boy, said, "Dad, you gotta be kidding. We don't have much food in the fridge." And his dad said, "Bob, go upstairs, get the church envelopes. We're 3 weeks behind." And he did that. And they also had food. And he said that gave them a lifelong lesson in what stewardship was. And Bob is, people will tell you in BC, he's one of the lead fundraisers, whether it's for First United organizing the business community through golf tournaments or whether it's in his own congregation. He lives what he learned as a little boy in stewardship. We talk about stewardship in terms of whole life stewardship. And whole life stewardship means just what we've talked about as a congregation. Stewardship through labor, through relationship, through earth, through financial. It's whole life, but it's also whole life through the length of our lives. Stewardship from the beginning to stewardship as to what lasting legacy do we wish to leave. And let me touch on the legacy giving for a minute. We transferred a number of funds from the church to the foundation, and before asking the board chair to sign off that these funds were in good shape and that the files were in good shape and we could carry out the wishes of the donor, I asked for a pile of the files to be brought and put on my desk. And I thought I was going to be looking through a group of files to see were they fairly complete and fairly clear. Instead, I had an absolutely remarkable opportunity to glimpse into the sense of stewardship of members of the church. Going back to the 1880s of the Methodist Church, we had requests covering every decade from the 1880s up until now. We had requests from people across the church, and the files, the older files had such gorgeous handwriting. You had to just pause and look at the beautiful handwriting that we don't know, most of us don't know how to do anymore. And they had letters from lawyers to accountants, all typed with the typing going up and down on different pressure and everything. And they had letters from the accountant's office back to the lawyer's office, all very formal. And what got me was the letters from the banks and the trust companies on their imposing letterhead. And guess what? I didn't recognize one name. All the banks and trust companies were gone. All the lawyers' offices and accountants' offices were gone. They'd all gone to dust. The typewriters that had typed the letters were all gone. The people with the beautiful handwriting were gone. Everything had gone to dust. What was in the file? It was the hopes and wishes of the donor who said, I want God's work to continue. And I'm going to make a stewardship gift as a lasting gift and make that part of the giving I've given to the annual programming of the church. I'd like that to stay there. And it was quite moving to think that those wishes carry on. And that in fact, whether we're helping young people, whether we're making an impact in Haiti or Africa, it will have effect for generations beyond what you realize. And you need to take a minute and feel really good about that. You know, when you think of legacy gifts, people often think about, well, I don't have that much money, I don't know that I can make much of a difference. The legacy gifts, that form of whole life stewardship, come in all sizes. And I was talking with Julia at the beginning, when we first got here, about a gift we got in our office that was just $100 and change as part of an estate and a will. And somebody in the office mistakenly said $100. And Doug Flanders, who heads up Legacy Giving, said, just a minute, let's find out the story. It turned out an individual that had been institutionalized all their life, that had never had a job and never had money. In the institution, they got what was known as PIN money, which was essentially a nickel a week for candies, paper, pencils, had saved up all of those nickels. And the $100 and change was everything that he had in the world. And so gifts come in all sizes and all varieties. And gifts come at different times in people's lives, but that's really how the United Church lives out its financial stewardship. So we do this because we live out the church's creed as our mission. We do this because we're carrying out God's work. We do this form of financial stewardship because, as Jean Vanier says, every life is unique, precious, and irreplaceable. So take a minute today and feel good about what you've done in financial stewardship for the church. And take a minute and thank people around you for what they've done to support the work of the church and to support God's mission with our gifts. Thank you.